Harrison Price for Monday, December 30th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the Historic Wall Center. And this show, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary with Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Harrison alongside Jeff Paterson, sitting in for Blake Price today and tomorrow. 4-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches and conducting things. We got a big show planned for you. First of all, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. How have your holidays gone so far?
Yeah, zipped by as it so often does. Canucks got a 3-day break in there, and then we're back to practice. And it's good. When you get 3 days off in the middle of the hockey season, it feels like an eternity. Gathered with the family. Everybody in town, so we had a big Christmas dinner. That part was great, and then right back at it when you say never ordinary.
Yeah.
Well, this weekend, definitely not ordinary.
No, not in the least. And we have breaking news here because every Boxing Day, I know myself, T-Mart, many of your longtime colleagues look forward to the J-Pat. That's it. It's done. All the Christmas decorations are put away. It took them till the 27th this year.
Yeah, the outside decorations, and we don't go huge, but we've got a display, and everything was soaked this year, obviously.
You didn't have the full Santa's Village inflatables?
No, just same stuff we've had for a while now. But when it's 9 degrees and raining, as it was this holiday season, everything had to dry out. So Christmas came down on the 26th as usual, but it didn't go away until the 27th. But yeah, it's done. What Christmas?
Glad things are back to normal at Casa Paterson on the North Shore. Our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question today is this Canucks season cursed? You can vote yes, you can vote no. Do so at the Harrison Price X and YouTube channels. J-Pat, you get first crack at this. What says you, buddy?
Well, they got a couple of lumps of coal in their stocking, that's for sure, in a season that's already been full of adversity. Adversity, yes. In-season injuries, those happen, and you have to deal with them, and if you're a truly good team, you find a way. And so, while a ton of adversity in the early going, they got a lot of their bodies back. Now Hughes and Pettersson join Hronek. I mean, that's a lot to ask of this team. I can't get to cursed, but you do wonder, where does it go from here? These next couple of weeks, Matt, are going to be both fascinating and, quite frankly, revealing. About where this season goes for the Canucks.
I think so. I'm like you, Jeff. I don't believe in curses. I don't believe in jinxes or things like that. I do believe in the phenomenon of Canucks luck because we have seen so many examples of it historically, but I don't believe it's a precursor. I don't believe it's a forecaster. I voted no, but for all of those who say something just hasn't felt right about this Canucks season so far to date, I completely understand that. And for those who want to draw on historical parallels and draw straight lines, I get that. I get that as well. Surrey Mitsubishi, big month happening at Surrey Mitsubishi. Lease month where you can walk away with a Surrey Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV 2024 for just $182 a week. If you want the gas option, the Outlander gas is yours for $105. The Eclipse Cross, just $100 a week. And the RVR, only $87 a week. Leasing a car, oftentimes a better option. Lower monthly payments, flexibility to drive a new vehicle, convenience of staying under warranty, minimal maintenance costs, plus you avoid that long-term commitment and depreciation hit of ownership. You can skate away with a $1,000 winter tire package, no charge 2-year maintenance package, and that government $5,000 rebate on the Outlander PHEV. Get it while it lasts. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey, or online at surreymitsubishi.ca. As we get to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Cursed? ? Canucks season was looking that way even before the injuries to Hughes and Pettersson and a third period collapse for the ages versus the Kraken. So let's run through it here, J-Pat. Thatcher Demko missed the end of last season. Said he would be good to go if they had gotten through to the Western Conference Final. Alas, no. We all learned of a popliteus muscle in the knee. He misses the first 2 months of the season. J.T. Miller, a leave of absence, misses 10 games. Filip Hronek, injured. The reemergence of the J.T. Miller, Elias Pettersson rift. Dakota Joshua coming back from cancer surgery. Nils Höglander, a disappearing act after 24 goals. Even Brock Besser, who missed some time with the concussion.
Well, and I think you lump Petey's struggles right out of the gate.
Of course,
on top of that.
Absolutely. That's in there too.
It's a lot. It is.
It would be something if this Canucks team could overcome. Rick Tocchet started with the phrase, embrace the hard. And wow, Jeff, has it been hard? And it's only going to get harder here over the next little while. We have Darren Dreger on the show. He's coming up. He told us he anticipates this is a 3-week injury for Quinn Hughes. So it looks like they're going to have to get through the next 9 or 10 games without Quinn Hughes. Pettersson, you're telling me you think there could be a couple of injuries there with Pettersson? What's the scuttlebutt?
Yeah, I heard around the rink yesterday that it may not be just one isolated issue that he's dealing with, that it got to a point that he felt he had to step away here for a handful of games. Now, they're saying, and Rick Tocchet was just talking in tongues yesterday with, it might be a week, give or take a day. And
we'll hear from him here coming up.
And with Hughes, week to week, now Dreger is saying week to week, perhaps. Whatever the case, the Canucks try to push forward. And when you thought of they beat San Jose, let the Sharks back in on the game before Christmas, but they got their win. Yep. And Quinn was a big part of that, played a ton, a couple of assists. Then as they got back to practice on Friday, neither one of those guys, and remember that they returned on Friday. Friday was their only skate before they played a 1 o'clock start on Saturday. So the fact that those guys weren't at practice on Friday, pretty good indication they weren't going to play Saturday, and then again, no practice on Sunday, and that's when Rick Tocchet gave us the update. But if you drop a game plan against a struggling Seattle team, in the absence of Hughes and Pettersson, you need your best guys to show up. Brock Besser scores twice. Jake DeBrusk scores his team-leading 16th goal. Conor Garland getting an A on his jersey. He scores for the first time in forever, and they waste all of that.
Yep.
Like, it all gets flushed in those final 5 minutes.
It was the perfect road game, even though it was at home for
it was a
55
terrible hockey
minutes.
game, but their better players were better than the Kraken's better players for 55 minutes.
Absolutely. Neither is going to make the trip here, as the Canucks are off to Calgary for a New Year's Eve showdown against the Flames, and then back in Seattle against those Kraken. Then it's Nashville here at home on Friday on a quick turnaround back-to-back. So you anticipate that Pettersson is going to miss all 3 of those games. Maybe he returns for next Monday in Montreal, which is the first game on a big Eastern road trip. Do we believe that Hughes, and it's a hand or a wrist with Hughes, Irf, I saw said?
Yeah, I think there's enough sort of signal out there that it is a hand. Beyond that, the Canucks aren't saying anything. They circle the wagons when it comes to injuries. I know the Sportsnet broadcast showed a couple of highlights from the Ottawa game where he got tangled up with Brady Tkachuk. There was another play somewhere along the line. We don't know the specifics on Pettersson, and yes, we've been able to narrow it down to a hand for Hughes, but beyond that, why was he able to play against the Sharks when he was questionable, and now he's week to week to week, so there is certainly some mystery there. So
let's hear from head coach Rick Tocchet, who addressed this after a Sunday practice yesterday. Here's Coach.
They're not going to make the trip. PD is probably a week away, give or take a day here or there, and Quinn's probably week to week. That's kind of probably the update we have for them.
Just playing devil's advocate a little bit, because he was questionable for the game against San Jose, and I know you said he wanted to play well and it won, but in hindsight, should Quinn have played that game?
Yeah, well, you couldn't have hurt what he has, wouldn't hurt anymore. He's just a tough kid, and he won us the game with a couple assists. I don't think him playing. I don't know. I don't think it would have made a difference. But we're all hockey players. Where do we? You want to play as he got it out for us and we won the game.
Well, I will give Rick talk at this. He has been unfailingly honest with us over his nearly 2 years as the Canucks bench boss. Sometimes he is missing the information. That was a little bit unconvincing there at the end with the I think.
Yeah.
But overuse, not a factor? Are you buying that?
Well, if it's a hand, like, again, I don't know where the injury, if there was a flashpoint where the injury occurred, that comes when you play 30 minutes a game, you're a target, other teams are trying to finish checks, and that's easier said than done against Quinn Hughes. Again, in-season injuries happen. Staying healthy and durable, it's everybody's ideal, but it's contact sport, and you're going to take some knocks along the way. So I'm still not fully sure, but I am, and that's why I asked the question there yesterday. I'm not certain. Is it the kind of injury if it was, let's say, a finger? And again, this is me just speculating. I'm not reporting anything, but if it's a finger, could they have put it in a splint and frozen it up and just let him play? But him recognizing that now he needs time for this to heal, like, could it be something like that? How does he go from being Quinn Hughes and doing all the things and 2 assists and then not being able to play for a couple of weeks? That's sort of the disconnect right now that, maybe we'll get some more reporting along the way. They're going out on the road. Usually it's hard to get information because there's not a lot of people that travel and follow this team away from home. So all we know is that we have to get used to life without Quinn Hughes, and you got a glimpse in the final stages there the other day against Seattle of just how difficult it's going to be for this team to get by.
Maybe our colleagues in Calgary will throw us a bone there tomorrow. Maybe we should reach out to our friend Ian Furness when they get down to Seattle and say, get to talk and ask him all these questions. And incidentally, Mike, were we playing that clip on a higher speed? Jeff sounded like Alvin in the Christmas with the Chipmunks.
That was the Canucks posted it that way. There was something a little off with their
audio. It sounded a little auto-tuney.
Yep.
Yeah, it did.
A little Post Malone.
Yeah, exactly. Are you starting a rap career? Should we...
Experimenting with auto-tune over the holidays.
Exactly. Jeff got a new Christmas gift. Okay, let's say it's 3 weeks for Hughes. And as mentioned, that's what Dreger's information is.
Yeah, have you looked at the schedule? Yikes.
So about 9 or 10 games. Does this scuttle his Hart and or Norris campaigns?
And I think we have to try to separate. This is a massive crushing blow to the Vancouver Canucks. Can they survive? We'll find out. On an individual basis, though, this is disrupting one of the greatest seasons we have ever seen from a Vancouver Canuck player. Full stop. Mm-hmm. And the Hart discussion, I would think, if he's out 3 weeks, there are just too many good players that are, on the super highway to 100 and whatever point seasons. The Norris, I think he could probably survive 3 weeks if it truly isn't about winning the scoring derby. But look, with the 2 assists he had against San Jose the other day, he put himself on a 100-point pace through 34 games.
Incredible.
And it was just, how is this going to play out? I was so excited to see how it was going to unfold when guys around him have been inconsistent and in and out of the lineup. He has been worth the price of admission almost every night for the Vancouver Canucks this year. And so it flat out sucks. It does. It does for him. It does for the team. It does for the fan base. And ultimately for his hopes of defending, retaining the Norris Trophy. Yeah, it's going to make it a steep climb here.
He's 3 points behind Cale Makar in the defenseman's scoring race. Now, he had 3 games in hand. I say that because he's not going to be able to make those games up. So it's about where does Makar push the level here in the next 3 weeks to a month. We shall see. It would be an awful shame, though, if he falls just short and you can sit there and look at 9-10 games missed. That costs him a repeat with this most austere trophy. All right, before we get into the loss to the Kraken, which incidentally was historic in and of its own right, let me tell you about Yellow Dog Brewing and the new Box of Tricks mix pack. Choose between the classic High Five Hazy IPA, 2 brand new brews, the Wander Tropical IPA and the Liquid Neon Juicy Pale Ale, and the limited release Ultra Color Amber IPA. They've taken that out of the Yellow Dog vault. Find it at government and private liquor stores. A 5-4 overtime loss to the Kraken. This is the first time in Vancouver Canucks history where they have blown a 3-goal lead and gone on to lose. Blown the 3-goal lead in the final 5 minutes and gone on to lose. Let's hear from Jake DeBrusk, who does acknowledge that, that loss hurt a little bit more than most.
It might feel like that from the outside, but in saying that, I think it's one of those things where we obviously have lots of pride in our games, and when things don't go right or when there's mistakes and breakdowns and things like that, guys feel it. They wear it on their sleeve in this room, and that's why we've been able to deal with adversities, because guys obviously care and are proud. But those are all nice things to say at this point. It's pretty much a sprint till the Four Nations, and we need all the points we can get, especially in our division. In terms of how it feels, it just doesn't necessarily feel like a normal loss. But in saying that, it's not dire. We got a game in I think 2 days, and if we don't regroup quickly, it's one of those things where this league doesn't wait for anybody.
Yeah, and he's right about that. He talked about a sprint to the Four Nations. It got me thinking, boy, if you get hurt a little later in the calendar, you got the full 2 weeks off, right? From February 8th to February 22nd, as that's the break the Canucks have for the Four Nations. But in the interim, the game tomorrow in Calgary, we mentioned Thursday in Seattle, Friday back home here against Nashville, and then the Eastern road trip, a 5-gamer. Montreal a week from tonight, and you might say, okay, that's an easy game, but the Habs have won a couple in a row here.
Went down and double-dipped in Florida. And
I have a cousin who's a big Montreal Canadiens fan, and he texted me Saturday going, who is this rookie? And honest to goodness, Jeff, I had never heard of him in my life, and he goes and pitches a shutout against the defending Stanley Cup champions. So maybe things are turning a little bit for the Habs with Patrick Laine back in the fold there. Washington, who has been one of the stories of the NHL season.
And they get Ovi back, and he scores in both games this weekend.
It's incredible. Carolina, we all know
on
how good Rod Brindamore's team is. Then Toronto's having a very good season.
Yeah, Carolina, Toronto, back-to-back.
Back-to-back, Friday, Saturday. And that's not easy travel either from Raleigh to Toronto. That's a longer trip than most back-to-backs.
It winds up in Winnipeg.
Come home to Winnipeg and face the Jets. So a murderer's row.
And then the Oilers when you get back
trip.
Off the road.
Yeah, Kings Oilers as soon as you get back. So a murderer's row of a schedule out east for the Vancouver Canucks. 500, you'd be doing backflips if you make it 500 through that sked without Hughes. Fair?
Yeah, and look, I'll give the Canucks every opportunity here. They're a better team than they were a couple of years ago, but I was just looking the last time they played a New Year's Eve game, and it so happened they were in Calgary a couple of years ago, and they lost to the Flames, and that was part of a 2-12 stretch, or 2-10 stretch over 12 games that ultimately led to the dismissal of Bruce Boudreau. And I vividly remember saying the same things as they got into that stretch of the schedule. What a gauntlet, finally the easy game. And sure enough, it all unraveled. And Bruce, there he went. And I'm not suggesting that the same fate awaits Rick Tocchet, but it is the same sort of uphill climb made that much steeper without Quinn Hughes and a lesser degree Elias Pettersson here. So the challenge is pretty much the same as it was a couple of years ago. Now, they were without Thatcher Demko at the time. They have Thatcher Demko back. And when I look at guys that need to flat out step up here, if this team is going to keep its head above water, Matt, J.T. Miller up front and Thatcher Demko, those are the guys.
No
sure,
question.
Others can and should step up, but it's Miller time, it's Demko time. And if they don't perform better than they have, then, things are going to slip away for the Vancouver.
And we're going to get to those guys, in particular Demko, and a comment from the coach after Saturday's game. But getting back there, the Kraken score twice with the goaltender on the bench, Jeff. And look, Rick Tocchet had the Midas touch last year. Every button he pushed worked. It was an absolutely sensational coaching season from tip to tail, one of the finest that I've ever covered in 25 years in this business. Hasn't been the same this year. I think that's fair to say. Let me ask you about two situations in the dying minutes against Seattle. First of all, no timeouts. he absolutely deplores using those timeouts as a momentum breaker, huh?
Yeah, and we have seen this on a number of occasions where teams have flipped the script, turned the tide, momentum is getting away from the Canucks, and Rick Tocchet loves to save his timeout for late game strategy sessions. Now, I thought it was interesting that at 4-3, the Kraken score and they get their 2 quick ones they get within a goal. Dan Bilesma called his timeout. So Tocchet actually got a break in that he had the timeout that he didn't have to use. Didn't impact his team, and the Kraken just continued to pour it on there. But yes, that is, and I think it's a fair knock against Tocchet. Like, he's planted his flag pretty firmly that in his eyes, timeouts are for late game strategy as opposed to just trying to break things up, slow things down. I think of a game here in Vancouver
For the
back in
most
November.
part, I agree with them, Jeff, but you have to be able to adapt when you feel the tide is real. Now, you may bail him out here because, as you mentioned, the timeout from Bilesma, but from time to time, I'd like to see him adapt and say, no, we're going to stem the bleeding here with a little conversation by the bench.
Chris Knobloch, Edmonton game in November, jumped out to a 3-0 lead. Canucks scored twice. They make it a 3-2 game, and Knobloch called his timeout and didn't race up and down the bench and call his players out. He just was using it to catch your breath, everybody. And
did Huska not do the same thing on opening night with Calgary, if I'm not mistaken, when they forged the big comeback?
Quite
against
possibly.
Anyways, would love to see a variety of uses of that timeout, Coach. Second thing I want to ask you about. He had been good. He had 2 goals. He was going for the hat trick. You want to get a guy an opportunity to go for the hat trick with the empty net. But Besser is out there trying to kill the 6-on-5. What'd you think?
Yeah, I have no issues. I think in Rick Tocchet's mind, Brock Besser has developed into a late game player now. He doesn't kill penalties, but the hockey smarts, the IQ. Now, we know that sometimes foot speed, is he going to be the fastest guy to a puck?
Short area quickness, agility, those things when you're playing in your own zone,
When
those things
Dakota
tend
Joshua
to matter.
scored, or we thought he scored, make it 5-1, I thought, like, that's just gravy at this point. There's no way that's going to come back to haunt them. That goal didn't stand. But Jake DeBrusk had a chance right in front of the benches at 4-2, 100 feet to the empty net, and he just missed. But that's game, set, and match. Like, that is it. If he scores there, he doesn't, and then the Kraken come back. I didn't have a huge issue with Besser being out there. I think at this stage, and again,
well, it's also because who else is available when Pettersson's missing. Anyways, okay, you mentioned Miller. We'll do Miller and then Demko here. And honestly, Jeff, it's 23 points in 25 games. Like, that's pretty good. Maybe not to his lofty standards, but that's nearly a point per game. You're tracking 75-plus points with a 31-year-old player. Let's try and quantify it a little more. When you say JT Miller needs to step up, what specifically are you looking for, and does the defensive side of the puck come into play there as well?
Well, he's sitting on 6 goals as they near the midway mark. He missed the 10 games, can't get those back. He has 6 goals. The last 2 into an empty net, Matt. Like, he just has not been a goal-scoring threat for the Vancouver Canucks. Now you take...
It's been ages since he scored on a goaltender. You got to go back to October, don't you?
Absolutely. So, at 5-on-5, there has been next to no goal-scoring production from JT Miller, who can be and should be a heartbeat guy, take the temperature of the hockey club when he's on. But he's not on. And I think back to his return and those 3 minutes when he met the media, and Farhan asked him, can you be the same fiery guy? And he didn't want to answer the question, and in that moment, fair enough, he wanted to keep it to hockey. But it's impossible to separate hockey from whatever it is that took him away from the game and now has brought him back. He hasn't been the same guy. He hasn't. He is not. I haven't left the rink since JT Miller's return. He flat up played Nathan McKinnon hard in the hard matchup against Colorado. That, I think, was his best game. He returned against Florida, and they shut out Barkov and Tkachuk, and good on him there. But just in terms of being like loud and the best player on the ice and leaving no doubt about it, we have not seen that JT Miller, and they are knocking on the door of the midway mark of their season here.
Now, I'm a little less concerned about the loud, emotional guy.
But that's when he's at his best.
No, I understand, but sometimes the loud and emotional is counterproductive too. We've not
seen
forget.
That. Yep.
But the reason I ask you about the defensive side of the ledger, and look, I think he's got to be a point per game guy here in the absence of these two players. In fact, point per game plus. Let's say it's 10 games for Hughes. I want to see Miller somewhere up around 15 points over this stretch because I think they're going to need that. But I say the defensive side of the puck as well because at least over the next week or at least the next 3 games without Elias Pettersson, you know he's going to get some of the matchups.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And look, without Elias Pettersson, without Quinn Hughes, with this defense core, with some of the wingers they have struggling as they are, Dakota Joshua, Nils Höglander, you mentioned Garland scores for the first time in forever. I do think the Canucks are going to have to win some ugly, low-scoring games here, right? Like that has got to be the formula to victory for the Canucks without these two star players.
And that's why I was okay with it really being a sluggish start, early, 1 o'clock face-off against Seattle, not a huge rivalry despite the geography. And the Canucks kind of quietly went about their business. They got a power play, they opened the scoring. And then they build on that. And so, again, for 55 minutes, they did a lot of good. But it is a 60-minute game. In this case, it turned out to be a 62-minute game. You have to play to the final buzzer. And, yeah, I mean, the loss of Hughes and Hronek absolutely came back to bite them. You look at the goals. Okay, the Schwartz goal is a bit of a strange bounce off Juleson and Demko. But then, just a brutal play. Juleson throws the puck into the middle, and then Carson Soucy does nothing with it. I mean, just a weak play from a guy you expect more from there. And then now it's game on. It's a 1-goal game, and Tocchet's got Joshua and Garland and Suter, 3 guys that he thinks he can trust and should be able to trust. They didn't play that shift particularly well. Forbert and Myers, 2 veteran defensemen. And how is Jaden Schwartz able to get the puck to the net and then get a second whack at it? But ultimately, in all of that, Matt, the last line of defense is the goaltender. And he can make some saves. Like the Vince Dunn goal from point blank, the first of the 2, not going to hold that against Demko. That just a bang-bang play that should never have happened. The strange bounce, that was a bit of a weird one. But the Beniers goal earlier in the hockey game was brutal. And even on a breakaway in overtime, like goalies win shootouts all the time, right?
They're better than 50%, as we saw in Canada, Latvia.
Well, but just at the NHL level, like a lot of shootouts are settled with 1 goal. That's it.
Right.
Like, yes, Vince Dunn had a breakaway in overtime. He's a defenseman. He doesn't get many breakaways.
Nope.
Like, it's allowed. It's in the rule books that Thatcher Demko could have made a save there for the Vancouver Canucks. So,
I don't actually think it is in the rule book, but I understand what you're saying. We talked, we mentioned that Tocchet spoke on Demko, and, he cut him a fair bit of slack. Let's take a listen.
We had a 4-1 lead. Scramble goals off of guys, off our defensemen. The other one, scrambling if we protect the guts. No, he was fine. Demmer's the least of our problems.
Is he the least of their problems, Jeff? It's 6 games now for Thatcher Demko since returning. He's 2-1-3. Mm-hmm. The goals against average is .343. The save percentage is .879. Is he the least of their problems right now? Or is that only because of the magnitude of the problems?
I suppose there's that. It is how you slice it. 2 wins in 6 games isn't great. Now, he has delivered points in 5 of those 6, so you like that part of it. But it's the goals that are getting past him. It's the number of goals. Like, giving up 5. I don't care who you are. You give up 5 in a game, you're an NHL goaltender, that's too many. And so for that crowd that was just wait till Demko is back and look out. Well, he's been back for 6 games, and it's pretty evident that he hasn't been a difference maker. He hasn't been the Vezina caliber Demko, and it's understandable. I think people are willing to give him some slack, but for those that were just flat out adamant that once Demko's back, look out, this team's going to have the 2 best goaltenders or the best tandem in the National Hockey League, I ask you, in the here and now, like, who gives them a better chance to win on a nightly basis?
Well, that was my follow-up.
And I think it's a conversation worth having.
I think it is absolutely a conversation worth having. We'll see. They're just wrapping practice, and media is going on now. I know he didn't want to announce his goaltender yesterday for the Calgary game, but you are absolutely in the ain't got time to bleed portion of your schedule when you look at the Canucks clinging to one of the final playoff spots in
If they lose flat out to the Flames, they drop below the
that's
playoff
it.
bar.
That's it.
The margin has been eliminated.
So, that now also becomes a conversation, and you now get to the point, if you're Rick Tocchet, Marco Terranius, Ian Clark, where you have to make a decision based on who gives you the best chance that particular night, and it may well be Kevin Lankinen making a majority of the starts in the short term, near term, immediate term, however you want to classify it, because he's been better.
Well,
and you got to give him his due.
A couple of things jump to mind here. One is Demko just lost to the Seattle Kraken, gave up 5. They see the Kraken on Thursday. I could see a world in which Lankinen starts in Calgary
and Thursday
in Seattle because Friday's back-to-back. So you know that they're going to split the two Thursday, Friday. But if you wanted to get Lankinen in 2 of those 3 games,
that's not the worst idea, J-Pat. In fact, I can get behind that. I mean, we'll see how Lankinen plays in Calgary. If it is in fact Lankinen in Calgary, and we'll see if there's any update here before we're done the show. The home record continues to puzzle.
Yeah.
7-7-6 at home. They haven't won consecutive home games all year. And this from our friend Rob Williams of the Daily Hive. The home schedule for the calendar year 2024 is in the books. 43 regular season games at Rogers Arena. 21, 12, and 10. Good for the 13th best home ice points percentage at .605, and to me that just illustrates how good they were on home ice last season, because needless to say the results this year have sunk all those averages.
Well, I think what it tells you is how good they were at home in the first half of last season.
January, February.
Yeah, well, no, October to December, because once you flip the calendar, this record is incorporated in that, right? The second half of last season.
Oh, sorry, yes, my bad.
I think, and I went back at Rob, not as hard as I've gone back at Rob at some things on Twitter. I said it very friendly. In the spirit of the season, but they were 3-4 in the playoffs as well. They played all year to win the division, get home ice. They were 1-2 against Nashville and 2-2 against the Edmonton Oilers. So they lost more than they won at home. Their secret sauce in the playoffs was sweeping the games at Bridgestone Arena and getting a split out of the first 2 games in Edmonton. So, to find back-to-back home ice wins, you have to go back to the late stages of the regular season last year. It's been that long for the paying customers to leave the building happy.
Something else that you and Rob went back and forth on. Boy, you two aren't getting along during this holiday season. Can we get Rob and Jeff some mistletoe? Conor, Garland, and Tyler Myers wore the A's for alternate captains in the absence of their captain, Quinn Hughes, and Elias Pettersson. I'm with you. I am not reading too much into that and the lack of a letter for Brock Besser until we see whether or not they're going to rotate these A's. But the chatter has picked up about Besser and how this might be his final year in Vancouver. And if they don't give him a letter at any point during the absences of Pettersson and Hughes, Jeff, is that telling you something?
I'm rarely surprised at reactions on social, Matt. I kind of go in expecting the worst and take it from there.
He is the longest tenured Vancouver
I was
Canuck.
surprised, though.
And he never seems to be talked about in the leadership group.
Right. So when the Canucks came out for warm-up, I noted on X that, Garland and Myers are wearing A's. And then Rob had his tweet there as well. And as I was formulating my thoughts and I'm watching in real time the warm-up and the people's reaction to, you're right, the number of people were like, that's it. This is clear. Besser's done here. This is an indication. It's a signal. I can't get there because
I can't draw the straight line, but it's another little kernel of evidence.
Right, but we do see teams differ at home and on the road sometimes, so I do want to see what happens in Calgary and into Seattle. All of that said, you're right. There are moments where you wonder about full respect to the longest tenured skater in the organization, a 40-goal guy who's been through a lot and played hard, just got played his 500th game as a Canuck last month.
Weren't convinced about 40 goals, right?
Sitting
Weren't
on him
quick
with a
to
contract.
sign the extension there.
All that kind of stuff. In saying that, without Hughes and Pettersson, Conor Garland was the leading scorer on the Vancouver Canucks for Saturday's game against Seattle and has now tied Elias Pettersson. In fact, that goal got him to 28 points. So, look, Tocchet and Garland have been together in 2 NHL cities now. You certainly can't question the hustle and the effort from Garland on a nightly basis. Earlier in the season, the consistency, his production's dropped a little bit. So I get the nod if this was, in fact, Rick Tocchet's decision.
I think it was.
And so do I.
And that's the other thing. This is a coaching decision. This isn't a management, or it's more so a coaching decision than it is a management.
More Besser and Garland, the conversation we're having here. Tyler Myers has worn an A a bunch of times.
Right. Tyler Myers is the coaching parrot, if you will. He's the guy who brings the message.
But he's also the de facto fill-in when one of the letters goes missing.
That's right.
We've seen that before. Now to have 2 letters missing, they're not going to replace Hughes. Nobody's going to get the C on their jersey. So they've got A's to go around here. And they elected to go with Garland. I mean, it was a decision. I don't think Tocchet was asked about it post-game. I wasn't there in the post-game scrum
It's not
on Saturday,
telltale yet. Yeah,
but I am curious to see what New Year's in
something
Calgary
to
brings.
monitor, and for everybody. And gosh, brutal pass by Tyler Myers in the overtime. Of that, there's no doubt. But for everybody who I've seen pile on Tyler Myers, folks, he is out there because they lack better alternatives, particularly on defense, right?
Yeah, but
we have
don't
said it.
Throw the puck between.
Well,
your
there's
on-rushing
2 skaters
teammates.
there. Look. If Tyler Myers had a little bit more hands and a little bit more hockey sense, he'd be all world, right? Because you can't teach
Quinn Hughes
his
is doing a
size.
360 there and putting a
Of
pass
course
on
he
the
is.
tape.
Of course he is. But this, sir, is not Quinn Hughes.
I was reminded of that, unfortunately.
Look, because the size, the speed, the tools, he has limitations to his game.
2 things came.
He's not particularly accustomed to being out there leading a 3-on-1 or a 3-on. Oh, should he stop and make a better play? Yeah, he probably should, Jeff. But you tell me who this coaching staff should be putting out there in those scenarios from this blue line with Quinn Hughes and Philip Roenick missing.
2 things came rushing back to me on Saturday as I watched this thing unfold and ultimately end in overtime. One was, and Tyler Myers was involved in a game against St. Louis a couple of years ago. Remember, he and Miller crashed behind the net, and
Right.
the Blues had the 3-on-0
Yes.
and just worked Jacob Markstrom.
That's right.
So that was one of them. And then the other was, I wrote about this at Canucks Army yesterday, because it was breathtaking to go from 4-1 to a 5-4 loss in the blink of an eye or a snap of a finger.
It's 5-1 for a moment there,
It was
too.
5-1. Were you at the game a decade ago when the Canucks took a 3-0 lead to the third and the Islanders scored 7
I was.
in the third
I was.
period?
Yeah.
6 on Eddie Lack and then an empty netter.
Yes.
But that one was like you just...
Astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, it really was hard to process in the moment, and still to give up 7. And
Was that also the game? Poor Gord McIntyre of the province. The province used to have their preview boxes,
right,
where the writers were supposed to, give a check mark to every forwards, defense, goaltending, special teams. There was a bunch of categories, and the Islanders were dreadful. And poor Gordy McIntyre had check marks all down the Canucks side of the ledger, and it was posted in the Islanders' room. And somebody wrote on the whiteboard, "Thanks, Gord."
It very well may have been. For them to get 7, because the Canucks defense that night, Tortorella was the coach, fine, there were issues, but it was Edler, Tanev, Bieksa, Hamhuis were all in the lineup. And this lead, everything that the Islanders shot
went in.
But the funny part in that game, and I pointed it out in my column, was, so the Islanders take a 4-3 lead, and then Chris Tanev scores. Chris Tanev scores a goal at 4-4, and you think, okay, that's, the Canucks are going to, enough's enough, they're going to grind out a win here. 10 seconds after Tanev scored, Matt Martin scored, and the onslaught
He's still there.
And then onslaught continued, and it got 7-4 finally. It was one of the craziest games I've ever seen. That finish the other day against Seattle is right up there on a very short list, and it was startling to say the least.
And at 4-2, I started to get worried.
But the Kraken came in on a 5-game losing streak, had scored a total of 6 goals in those 5 games.
Jeff, there is all sorts of unrest in that front office, too, is my understanding. you provided the get well card for the Seattle Kraken in the final 5 minutes of the third period. Okay, line combinations, defense pairings today at practice. It is similar to what we saw Saturday against Seattle. DeBrusk with Miller and Besser, Suter centering Höglander, Garland, Bluger centering Heinen and Sherwood. I noted, because I was, believe it or not, Jeff, I got the Kraken Canucks
On King?
on King.
Yeah.
I saw Forsland, and so I stayed with that broadcast for a little bit. Has Max Sasson asked for a different pronunciation?
Yeah, apparently. Shorty talked about it on the local
I
broadcast.
sort of remember him telling us
that-
it's not Sasson when he
Well,
first...
the story was that Al, the dad, in the games in Ottawa or wherever on the road trip, went up and introduced himself to Dan Murphy and said, "I'm Al Sasson." And Murph stopped in his tracks and thought, hang on a sec, I've only known the family as the Sassons.
Yeah,
So-
I thought it was Sasson. I thought he mentioned that
Yeah.
to us when he was first up here a couple of years ago as that college free agent. So Max Sasson with Joshua and PDG, and then Forbert Meyer, Susie, Julesen, Brandstrom,
So same.
Day Harney. So is there anything to fix? Is there any levers available here to the coaching
I think
staff there?
Load up on that top line, and Besser is all of a sudden scoring again. He's got 5 goals in his last 3 games. Like, that's great. DeBrusk scored again. Need Miller going. Then that second line. Like, Garland can't go another 11 games without scoring. He just can't. Given the position, the amount that he plays, Suter and Joshua, they need to be... Dakota Joshua... Again, I'll give him time here, but it keeps looking the same. Like, I'm not seeing progression in his game, and now it's fact that he's fallen to the point that, But I mean, part of the problem is he's fallen to the fourth line because Höglander's getting this opportunity. Talk about a guy that better do something with it.
Well, so Jeff, I think you need is especially minus the 2 offensive forces we've talked about. I think if you don't see a game and a game soon from Joshua, and frankly, there might be some others there as well, I think you have to consider Lekkerimäki simply because he has that one-shot potential and capability.
No, and I'm down for that.
And
I think,
there are players here who are not indispensable at this moment. So I think
Höglander came out of those games before Christmas. You hope that was like the ultimate message sending and the sharp stick, and yeah,
we're going to talk more about him tomorrow because Tuckett has had some interesting things to say about Höglander here of late. Lastly, and I don't know about you, Jeff, I had checked in on some of the Amazon Prime Monday night games in the past, but I had not watched one tip to tail, in part because the Canucks had not been on until a week ago against San Jose. I tuned in, and first of all, I absolutely love what they do with warm-up.
Oh, maybe the best thing that they do.
The cameras, first of all, the vivid detail of the picture, because it's streaming and not cable, is beautiful. But the cameras and the ambient sound from ice level in the warm-up is spectacular. Liked the broadcast, liked everything about the broadcast, but what they do, it's vivid. It feels, as opposed to a lot of the run-of-the-mill broadcasts now on other networks where it just feels like another game. I saw Lachlan Irvin of Canucks Army, your colleague there, say, one of my biggest gripes with how the NHL broadcasts have changed is that they don't have a sense of occasion anymore. Every game feels the same as the last. Prime at least seems to be trying to make them an event again. Could not agree more. Lachlan, it was beautiful.
No, I mean, look, I grew up at a time when you were lucky. You got a game on a Wednesday and a game on a Saturday. Now every game obviously is shown, and there is a sameness to it. And Hockey Night in Canada just therefore isn't the event that it once was when you had to wait all week to get your Saturday night game, and then they went to the doubleheaders. And they still do some good things, but change can be good. And this is the San Jose game before Christmas that we're talking about, if people didn't differentiate.
A week ago,
Yeah, last Monday. Now, a couple of things. And I went to the first 2 periods, and I came back to the studio to host Rinkwide. So I watched the third period, and I was curious because I did want to get a feel for the Prime broadcast.
So you're telling me we get Prime in here?
We
Good.
do, yeah.
Excellent.
My own personal account.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Anyhow,
You can expense
enough of
that?
Yes. So there were a couple of things. One is because it was so close to Christmas and travel You mentioned John Forsland, who does Kraken games. He's usually the voice of Prime.
That's right.
Kenny Daniels,
That's right.
longtime voice of the Red Wings.
Former Hockey Night in Canada guy.
Yeah, but we didn't get the full Prime delivery. Jody Shelley is usually doing color. He was not part of this one. It was Thomas Hickey. It was Shane Knighty, I think,
it was
the
Knighty.
Vegas crew. Mm-hmm. And he does a nice job. But so this wasn't the full-on Prime effect. I like the fact that they bring the intermission. Andy Petrillo doing it from the concourse.
Yep.
I
like
but
that
I
as
love
well.
the warm-up. And look, I get it's not going to be for everybody.
No.
But it's value added for the ones that want to see
And
what's
no
going on before a
narration.
game.
No narration. That's the best
Right.
part. Just the pictures tell the story.
So you
You
get
can
to see,
imagine whatever storylines you want as they put the camera on Macklin Celebrini
Right,
or on
and-
Quinn Hughes or on.
and for the people that don't get to the games or don't get to the games early,
Right.
there's still 5 or 6 guys on most teams that go without the bucket, right? The helmet.
Yep.
So, you see that. You get a little bit more of that, just the expression on guys with their game faces on, getting ready to go. Again, it's not going to be for everybody. Some would say, warm up, big deal.
I absolutely love
But
it.
I think, for the absolute hockey nerd, that you can pick up whatever you pick up, guys working on their skills or their sticks and all that kind of stuff. I love it. I think, why not? Like, more of the same?
Why not?
No. But
Why not?
if you can find ways to...
Here's the thing that you have, and also, the accoutrement around the broadcast. I say the broadcast, but the stream. They're not bound by time.
Yep.
Like a regular broadcaster. So why not?
So
Turn the cameras and microphones on early for warm up.
No, I love it.
Great idea.
The other thing that
do
I
a
found,
proper pre-post.
Yeah. And we asked that night on Rinkwide, just on top of the game, what did people think of the
Jeff.
presentation? It is hilarious, though, and I wasn't surprised by this part, and you've seen it too. People here are just so conditioned to Shorty delivering them a hockey game that anytime it's another voice, even guys that have been doing this forever, like Ken Daniels, it's different, and that scares some people. So that was a lot of the reaction. It didn't sound right. We miss Shorty. All of that.
And I get that.
There's 3 more to go.
Get that.
In the Montreal game, I think the start of the road trip is a Prime game, if I'm not mistaken, Monday night. There are 3 to go. That was the only one that's going to be originating out of Vancouver. The other 3 that the Canucks will play this year are all road games. So we won't see the Prime crew, but I know the day before the game, I saw like 2 big 18-wheelers rolling in around Rogers Arena. Like they come with all their gear, and like it's a big event. They put on a production, and I think they're doing a terrific job. So I'm sort of excited to see if this is the jumping on point for them.
Yes, for
where
sure.
can they take it?
And I got to say, I was very impressed with the King broadcast of the Kraken game as well, in part because they have Linda Cohen and Allison there in the studio.
Yeah.
They do a full post game.
Yep.
Furness joined them. They do a full post game. So anyways,
Ian and I were texting. In the second, you can imagine the tone of the texts after 2 periods from both me and Ian.
I was texting with Ian too. I said, what a gift for the Kraken. You don't have to face Hughes or Pettersson here tonight. And the next thing you know, anyways, I thought it was, being able to sample alternative broadcasts
I will say
this past week
just a
has been eye-opening, both on a local cable level in Seattle and on
But a
streaming.
shameless plug here, because I see a lot of people that say, why do the Kraken get a local post-game show and we in Vancouver don't? Rink wide. We do this after every game. We're here for an hour after every single game. We break it down for you. So there is local content being pumped out right after hockey games. If you haven't checked out Rink Wide, give us a shot.
Yeah. Let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta Bar. Greta, a fantastic spot to catch all the games home and away. Your steps from the stadium. They have the fantastic street food menu, pregame, postgame. Check out the arcade that encircles the bar, weekly drink specials. Greta, the place to be, 50 West Cordova. Greta Bar, let the games begin. Darren Dreger coming up. He's got the update on Hughes' timeline. Also, trade chatter picking up on J.T. Miller. You're going to want to hear this. Plus, Cam Robinson from the World Juniors. We'll talk some Canucks. And then we'll talk about this most underwhelming Canadian side in the nation's capital that has already lost a first-ever game to Latvia at this tournament. Was nip and tuck against Germany going into the big New Year's showdown against the USA tomorrow. Also want to mention, Jeff's here tomorrow. We got shows tomorrow and Friday, so we'll miss a couple of days over the course of the New Year's. Hope you have a happy one. Blake will be back on Friday from his Davos excursion at the Spengler, where Canada has already been eliminated.
We sent him over there with one assignment to
You
get
had one
Canada to the
job.
Spengler Cup.
You had one job. Yeah, and he failed.
Yeah, but the other part of his job was posting some incredible photographs.
Well, Davos shows pretty well. Well, you can understand why the World Economic Forum wants to go there.
Switzerland's amazing. I've only been in the summertime, and it's spectacular in the summer. Mountains everywhere, and then the snow
in the winter at Christmas time.
I can only imagine. So
chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Our Bet365 bets of the day. I'm going World Juniors. J-Pat, you're going where?
Well, I'm going down the I-5. I don't know if you've heard about this plucky Seattle Kraken hockey club that
Sure have.
will not be stopped, won't take no for an answer. What do they do for an encore? They're at home to the Utah Hockey Club, one of those teams that's right there breathing down the Vancouver Canucks' neck. Kraken, the underdogs at home. Now, again, they came into Vancouver on a 5-game losing streak, so they haven't been playing particularly well, but was this some sort of turning point? We'll find out, but there's value there. You can get the Kraken on the money line at 230.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I have grave concerns about this Canadian World Junior entry. I don't believe they chose the best roster. I absolutely hate the coach and the coaching job that has been done here. Dave Cameron's claim to fame was that he blew a 3-goal lead in the third period of a gold medal game at this tournament and somehow got invited back. What is it? Was it just saving on travel for Hockey Canada because he coaches the 67s there in town? Look, this Team USA isn't as strong as previous incarnations, but I like them to win tomorrow. And there's very little value on a straight-up victory, so I'm going USA minus 1.5. Yeah, the empty netter paying it plus 200. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Darren Dreger coming up next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
So Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center, and this next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Canadian-owned, operated, proudly a history dating back more than a century. 5 locations in BC, Abbotsford, Victoria, Chilliwack, Willowbrook, and Langley, and of course Coquitlam Center. Committed to customer satisfaction. They got a large selection of Canadian mined diamonds, lab-grown diamonds, mined diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, shine bright. As we welcome in TSN Hockey Insider, one half of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, and wish a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to Mr. Darren Dreger. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. You know, I don't know if you can see my chair. Can you see my chair? It's like antique
wow, look at that
pattern. Yeah, like all kidding aside. So my wife Holly used to work at a local funeral home. And not to take this into a morbid direction, but her boss was throwing out this antique chair, office chair, and Holly said, "Hey, it's a pretty nice chair. Do you want this chair?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, bring it home." So I've been using this chair for the last couple of years, but you guys can probably hear it, right?
Yeah, a little creaky.
It's a little creaky. Yeah, so the powers that be, the brass at TSN, the IT guys are like, you got to get a different chair. So my holidays were good, but I did not get what I asked for, which was a new office chair. No.
I thought you were going to say you were asking for like the matching leopard print.
No, that's for a different pod I do, yeah.
So to recap, Darren Dreger joining us from the Jungle Room, and he's been naughty this year. Santa did not gift him a new chair. It's been an extraordinary couple of weeks in Canucks land, Dreg, since we last talked to you. And, one of the things that we've kicked around here is ultimately, does Elias Pettersson or J.T. Miller have to go? You've done some digging around on the Miller side of that equation. What can you tell us?
Well, look, I'm certainly not in a position to answer the question, does either one of those players, star players, have to go? What I know is, and this is based on intel and sourcing from around the league, that, there's been a lot more chatter certainly around J.T. Miller. And I don't think anyone would be surprised by that because, his name always seems to find that rumor mill. And, based on what went down recently, where you had Rick Tocchet come out, you had Quinn Hughes speak on this, you had Patrick Galvin talk about what was once an alleged rift between those two guys. Now the allegations have been removed, right? I mean, you don't have to like your coworker. I can appreciate that. And maybe it's much ado about very little, but I think that did fuel the speculation, fuel the fire among clubs around the National Hockey League who admit that the chatter specific to JT Miller has increased. And as far as Pettersson is concerned, I'm sure that Patrick Galvin gets calls and has had conversations in the past. I mean, when you look at the talent level of Elias Pettersson, there wouldn't be many teams that wouldn't have an interest in that, despite the fact that for whatever reason, he just seems to find ways to get in his own way. But I want to remind people that teams have conversations, managers have conversations about basically every player. We know on every team there are untouchables. But in this case, even though those are two top-end talents, and in one case, you've got the full protection on JT Miller, right? I mean, it's the no-move clause, which, by the way, he has not been asked to consider waiving. He has not. But that doesn't prevent teams from calling and having that level of conversation. And just an acknowledgement to Patrick Galvin. Look, if you're ever getting to that place where you're looking to move JT, here's what we'd be interested in doing because we like that player. I do think that those conversations have been had, and I think that they've increased of late. But that doesn't mean that JT Miller is imminently getting moved.
If I can draw a line to a potential landing spot, Dregs, we know Chris Drury and the New York Rangers made a play for JT Miller a couple of years ago. Of course, he's an original Rangers draft pick. The Rangers with the worst record in the NHL outside of Buffalo and Chicago over the last 2 months. And our old friend Larry Brooks with a column yesterday. They have quit on their coach. They have quit on the organization. They have quit on themselves. And they have quit on the fans paying top dollar at the Garden.
Well, okay, so let's start with Larry's column. And look, he is an award-winning, long-standing journalist who has been at the top of his craft for many, many, many years. And he has poison in his pen from time to time. We know this, right? I mean, he can craft a column unlike any others. I don't recall the last time I saw or read something more eviscerating of a talent pool than this one. But Larry obviously has had enough of it. He's got a front row seat to it. And his sources within that organization are impeccable. But that's why, again, from an outside perspective, I think it was so damning, right? Because, he took the players to task. And I feel like that's probably an extension of maybe what ownership feels or other high-level sources within that organization. And the reason I phrase it that way is I'm reminded, I was there in Florida when Mike Landauer of the Ottawa Senators came out, and he was almost vibrating after the conversation he had with our colleague Pierre LeBrun. Passionate, and chose his words specifically in targeting, which was the word that Larry used in a tweet, that club for allegations of soft tampering around Brady Tkachuk, right? Well, I mean, obviously, ownership in Ottawa felt like Larry's sourcing was coming from the New York Rangers in some way, shape, or form. So now fast forward to where we're at here, and it's going to be interesting for Larry moving forward. I mean, J-Pat, you guys have been in a lot of dressing rooms over the years. When you fire an absolute bomb like that one, and Larry will be in that room, no question about it. He's going to be front and center. I was swapping text messages with another general manager, and you guys remember the old Dan Boyle situation where he tried to get Larry thrown out of the room way back in the day. So anything and everything is possible, but the full takeaway in a long-winded way is if Brooks is saying this about how he feels the players are playing for or not playing for Peter Laviolette, then Peter Laviolette has a problem. And it seems like Peter's days on the bench of the New York Rangers, according to that column, our numbers.
So you think it'd be a coaching change before a major trade on Broadway?
No, not necessarily. I
Okay.
mean, look, as far as Chris Drury is concerned, it's pretty evident based on what he's already done and the approach that he's taken, right? And taking down his captain, Jacob Trouba, in throwing it out there that Chris Kreider is available, in trading Capo Caco and the trade speculation around there. Chris Drury is not afraid to get his hands dirty. So, yeah, if there's a trade fit that works with the Vancouver Canucks, but look at it from Patrick Allvin's position here. You know, I can appreciate why if we want to link Vancouver and New York, why the Rangers would have interest in Miller. Because, yeah, like we've talked about many times in the show, he drags you into the fight when he's on top of his game. And it does seem like that's a little bit, if not a lot, of what the New York Rangers need. And they know his history. But if I'm Allvin, you want one of my best players? Okay, I want one of your best players. Which guy is that? Huh?
Well, I
Is
think
it Adam Fox? Who is it? Like, go down the list. Which guy is it? And maybe that's the reason. So just to wrap up, I think, yeah, for sure, a major trade with the Rangers is possible. It's plausible. But based on what I read from Larry Brooks, I could also see a coaching change, and that might be unfair to Peter Laviolette.
Dregs, one of the things you just said there was with J.T. Miller when he's at the top of his game, and he hasn't been there at all this season, and certainly since coming back from the personal leave, he still just hasn't looked anything close to the game breaker, this fire-breathing power forward. Now, Elias Pettersson out of the lineup, Quinn Hughes out of the lineup. This seems like a real opportunity for J.T. Miller to sort of announce his arrival to anybody in the National Hockey League, but first and foremost here in Vancouver. As we switch gears a little bit, the news yesterday that Hughes is week to week, which is absolutely a crippling blow for the Vancouver Canucks. And, you know, just derailing. Hopefully it doesn't derail, but a gut punch to one of the great individual seasons that we have seen from a Canuck player out here with all the things that Quinn's done. Elias Pettersson's going to be back in a week. They can probably survive that. But what, if anything, are you hearing about the nature of and the length of either of these injuries?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, as they stated, it does sound like Patterson is more day-to-day. Now, whether that, stretches into a longer period, who knows? I mean, what we've learned about the game of Elias Pettersson, he's got to get stronger, right? He's physically got to get stronger, and his level of compete and strength has to match what he has in skill. And when that happens, you're going to get an all-world type of player, but that's on him. Quinn Hughes, devastating. I checked in on it yesterday, and the messaging I got is that it should be, 3 weeks or less. That was the sense that I got. So that's week to week. If you get into the second week and now you're pushing 14 days, again, what you have to understand, and you guys do, but anyone listening is, it's not in the best interest of the Vancouver Canucks or Quinn Hughes to push whatever he's dealing with, right? So if it takes 3 weeks to get him healthy, I don't think that the alarm bell should be ringing unless this team, to steal that old Brian Burke clause, drives the 18-wheeler over the cliff. And I don't think that that's going to happen if, J-Pat, to start where you started or to end where you started, J.T. Miller, grabs everybody by the bootstraps and let's get at it. There's opportunity for him, opportunity for every player in that lineup to get something done. And in the meantime, you've got Patrick Allvin and Jamie Rutherford doing what they do. And that's working the phones and looking for the pieces that are going to make this team better. But they're not going to do that. There's no sense of urgency or desperation because two key guys are not going to be available for a stretch here.
So you don't think this ups the ante in any way with, like, Hronek was already out and it's going to be for another month, even though he's back skating, and now Hughes for 3. Like, we've known that the Canucks have been in search of a defenseman even when they're healthy. They need help. So you don't think that this development expedites the search in any way?
Well, no, and the only way it would is if the Vancouver Canucks are willing to cave on a player that they don't want to be part of it. And who is that player? It doesn't necessarily have to be a roster player. It could be a top prospect. It could be a collection of things, right? Financially, depending on who you're working with, you've got to make the money work. That's obvious just to comply. But, we've talked about the Rangers, and there's been much speculation in the last month plus around the Buffalo Sabres. Well, every time I check in with Kevin Adams, I'm reminded, now they've won a few games here, but he's reminding that, look, I'll move one of my top guys. I just need that top guy coming back the other way. And my definition of the other team's top guy isn't the same as theirs. So unless those two worlds come back together and one general manager changes, then I don't feel the sense of urgency. But all that can change with a simple phone call.
So, to your knowledge, the Canucks were not close to anything by the holiday roster freeze? Dregs?
Yeah, I mean, we might be dealing in semantics here, Matt, right? Do I think that management of the Vancouver Canucks was pushing right up to the buzzer of the freeze? Sure, of course. And not Vancouver related, but, you know, I had a conversation with someone deeply involved with the Montreal Canadiens, like maybe 12 hours before the freeze. And the messaging I got back was, hey, yeah, we've got some lines in the water here, but, you know, unless something changes, then now we're probably going to be quiet. And then kaboom, the Carrier deal happens with the Nashville Predators, and Barron goes the other way, and you're like, "Whoo, geez." Well, that came together pretty quickly. So that might have been a scenario where Vancouver was involved with another club, not Montreal. But let's go back to Jimmy Rutherford's availability with After Hours, right, with Ray Ferraro and Scott Oak, where he talked about how he felt like they were two pieces away from being a contending team. We knew one of them was a top four defenseman, and the other piece, as it turns out, is a better forward. Okay, well, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Maybe a little bit, just to revisit J-Pat's comment on a heightened level of urgency. Maybe that, because, you know, now you're looking at Quinn Hughes out for week to week. Maybe that does put a little bit more pressure on trying to get that defenseman. But I'll repeat myself in saying that, you know, unless there's more of a willingness from Vancouver's perspective to give up a better player or better assets, then I don't think they were that close or are close as we're having this conversation right now.
Speaking of roster freeze, Dregs, that was quite a fair bit of activity there. Mm-hmm. Are we looking at a new sort of mini trade deadline in December going forward?
I hope not, because I can tell you that we count the minutes until that freeze hits. No, all kidding aside, it's one of the times of the year where you can feel that there's a higher level of attention, right? And, you know, we use, you know, kind of catchphrases like there's a buzz around the NHL, there's trade chatter that's happening and all of that. But most definitely this year, there seemed to be more of it around the freeze and then coming out of the freeze on the 27th. So it's definitely a deadline. I was going to say soft deadline. That's not right. It's a deadline that every general manager, all clubs pay close attention to, because at that point you're feeling good or you're feeling terrible about where you're situated in the standings, but you're also recognizing that, look, this is a reset for our club. If we're sagging, let's hope that the players get a couple of days break and then they come back ready to go for a push that we're going to need to have, you know, to conclude the first half of the regular season and get us going in the second half. So it matters to the clubs for sure.
It's kind of funny. I was thinking, and obviously the groundwork they do before the freeze can come to fruition after the freeze lifts. So, you know, we may still see some movement here with talks that had happened prior to Christmas. But I also, like all the chatter around the draft, and then quite often you'll see a few days after the draft, teams will go back to their home bases, and then you see some trades happen ahead of free agency. So maybe some of that. What about Four Nations this year? Do you think that is going to impact the trade deadline in any way? And I ask that because it's an unnatural break in the schedule that we're not used to. And I wonder if some teams get to February 8th and recognize that they're going to be sellers at that point as opposed to a month later when the deadline actually hits.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I do think that there's something to it. Jimmy and now Billy Guerin with the Minnesota Wild. I mean, they've always embraced the sensitivity, but the reasoning behind why you get in that trade pool early, right? And a lot of times it's player friendly, but then as a team, you also, accept the dividends that can be paid out by doing that, because your player settles, his family settles, his comfort level grows, and you hope that helps you deep into the season and into the playoffs. And I think we could see more of that. I do. I think there's pressure on the players. Like, we're already talking about some of the injured guys who are named to the Four Nations rosters and whether or not, they should be available or will they be available. So if we're already talking that several weeks outside of Four Nations, then I would think that most pro scouting departments and general manager offices are looking at it similarly, saying, well, based on the break, it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to try and get into that world a little bit earlier than we would normally.
Yeah, and I've always thought it wise to get in early for many of the reasons you outlined, Dregs. Marvelous stuff, sir. I hope that new chair comes for New Year's. Have a happy one, and we'll catch up next week, Darren.
Thanks, Brad.
All right. Happy New Year, guys.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So, Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss got 5 locations here in BC: Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Victoria, Coquitlam Center, Willowbrook, and Langley. They're committed to customer satisfaction. You can check out the large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They've got diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. A history dating back more than a century. Proudly Canadian-owned and operated. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, for the love of jewelry. As we're joined by the Director of Content for Elite Prospects, he joins us from the World Junior Hockey Championships in the nation's capital, Mr. Cam Robinson. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, buddy.
Same to you, fellas. Great to see you. Good to see you, J. Pat.
Yeah.
Good.
We're going to talk about the calamity that is this Canadian World Junior team in a moment, but we start with the Vancouver Canucks, Cam, and our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Is this season cursed?
Somebody's out there not knocking on wood, maybe, hey? Something's ripe in Denmark. So, it's been a tough go, and I think that it's one of those things. Last year, nothing could go wrong, and this year, not a lot's going right. And life without Quinn Hughes is a dark and scary place, and I don't know how long that team can tread above water without him.
See, this is what it's come to. Cam can't fathom a Canucks world without Quinn Hughes, that he had to get halfway across the country, just had to get out of here, doesn't want any part of it.
Had to escape it. What, so, 3 weeks or so for Hughes, like, what do you think would be weathering the storm here without
500 would be spectacular if you can do that without the arguably Hart Trophy leading kind of player, the guy that impacts the team the most in the league. If you could go 500, I think that you would call that a win. This team's had a really hard time picking up extra points in the extra frame, and losing Hughes is only going to hurt that as well. So you got to find a way to win some games in regulation. Obviously, Pettersson being out too isn't going to help matters. They're going to have to scratch and claw. They're going to have to try to win 2-1 games, 3-2 games. They're going to need big goaltending performances. They're going to need guys to step up. That means Brock Besser's got to keep scoring. JT's got to get off the schneid. They got to find a way to score by committee a little bit, and then have those role players maybe step up and get hot. And the defense, though, we talk about it all the time, right? There is no replacing Quinn Hughes. And so it's just going to have to be trying to batten down the hatches and reduce and limit the chances against as much as he can.
What do you think, Jeff? Would 500 over the next 3 weeks, what does that do to their playoff predicament?
I think, look, they wouldn't have a trophy to skate around the ice with, but if they could get 500 through the next 3 weeks, I'd almost commission a trophy for them. I think that would be a massive achievement for this group. Again, those final 5 minutes against Seattle the other day was a glimpse into the future here, I think, a little bit. I mean, not that drastic perhaps, but I think we all have to be prepared to live with some mistakes that are going to wind up in the back of the net. So given the schedule and who's missing in this lineup, Cam was right. Like, I look at Thatcher Demko. Like, it's go time now. He hasn't been terrific. JT Miller's been way too quiet here since his return. Like, there are guys that can help this team. I don't know what carry them, but boy, I would sign off on a 500 run over the next 8 or 10 games for certain.
What about Miller, Cam? What do you think? Do you think he can finally find his game here? What have you seen from him? What's been missing?
Yeah, he can find his game. And maybe it's just now Pettersson's out of the lineup. They apparently, PD lights it up when JT's out, and maybe JT will wake up with PD out. But I think it's between the ears, and it's something we've talked about for a few of these players, is that he needs to get out of his own head and just go be a bully out there. That's when he plays his best hockey, is when he's bullying guys. He's in on the forecheck. He's taking pucks hard to the net with those power moves, and he's going to get a greasy goal. He's going to get something off his knee or a bang in a rebound. It doesn't have to be walking downhill and sniping it bar down to get things rolling. You just got to get going. So I do think that he can find that level. And I think that in a situation like this, without Hughes, without Pettersson, it's like he is the leader. He's always been kind of that emotional leader on this club, but now he is like the leader in the room right now and out on the ice. And so he's got to wear that. And maybe that's added pressure when he's already struggling a little bit. But I think hopefully he can use that and turn that into a motivator to really kind of gear up and get together for the boys and get it moving.
All right, let's switch gears. You're in Ottawa. You're covering the World Juniors. Anybody that's watching this can see that you've got some nice earth tones going here. Matt and I are sort of black and whitish here. No red anywhere to be seen. This isn't out of protest, but my goodness, it has been tough to watch on television. I can't imagine that it's any better there in person for Canada. The loss to Latvia was an incredible storyline, but some tough slogging against Germany last night. 3-0 a final, but really a 1-0 hockey game, and then a fortunate bounce that gave them a little bit of breathing room.
For the record, I considered maroon here.
Yeah.
Well, how can you not love the Latvian effort?
Fair enough.
In this tournament. Cam, over to you.
First thing first, like what a pro segue there, J-Pat. Like that was phenomenal. It has been very difficult for the Canadians to not necessarily generate offense, but to finish it off, right? Like they've been able to put up, against Latvia, they had 50 plus shots. Everybody wanted to say they got goal lead. He had a great game against them. No disrespect, not taking anything away from him. But he wasn't forced to make a ton of, 5-bell saves. There's been a lot of kind of spam shooting from the outside, kind of the curling at the top of the circle and just letting it fly without traffic, not penetrating the middle of the ice. They had like one cross slot pass on the power play and they scored in that game. And it's like, well, let's go, boys. Let's move the puck. You got to get it into those high danger areas. Got to get the defenders moving across. And then you got to fire it. And then you got to go attack looking for rebounds. Go get some, like I just said about JT, go get some greasy goals. And so, talking to those kids after the game, they won 3-0 against Germany. Nobody was satisfied, right? They know that they need to score more goals. I had a little one-on-one chat with McKenna and, he's averaging 14 minutes a night. He saw less than 12 last night, less than 12 when he played Finland. This is a new situation for him when he's so used to playing 20 plus minutes. He's not on the top power play unit. He's not on the top line. He's their most dynamic offensive player. They need to find a way to get him onto the ice more and producing. So I know a lot of people have been kind of ragging on the team for their decisions on who they brought, which, is fair. They left some big names. We talked about it in the past. But I think that there is enough talent on this team to generate and to finish off enough offense to win a gold medal. They're still in a position now. They can win tomorrow night against the US and they're first in their pool. They lose, they're third. But they need to deploy their players in the right way. So we took a step forward in that regard. They got Sam Dickinson out on the top power play. They moved Oliver Bonk into the bumper. Bonk had some choice words for us in the scrum last night. He said, I heard people were saying I sucked as the QB, so they put me back in the bumper, and I felt like he was looking me dead in the eyes. I never said you sucked. I just preferred him in the bumper. That's all. I just prefer him in the bumper. So they're making incremental steps, but you got to get Bradley Nadeau coming downhill where he is a shooter and a finisher. He shouldn't be on the goal line in the power play, and you got to get Gavin McCann more ice time. Maybe they got to put me behind the bench and I'll start kicking these guys.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, please. And we've both got a question about Dave Cameron here in a second, but you say player selection, and I couldn't help but notice the tweet you had, a quote from an NHL executive on Zane Parekh, the Calgary Flames first-round top 10 defenseman being left off this team. Quote, it's unconscionable that the country's top offensive defenseman isn't available to them. They even had a second chance to make up for the mistake, but didn't. This was after he wasn't invited to camp, then he was invited to camp. And Sam Dickinson might turn in to be a fine power play quarterback in the National Hockey League, but Zane Parekh could run an NHL power play right now, couldn't he?
He absolutely could. And, the really interesting thing, too, is that, you didn't bring Parekh because you're like, okay, we're bringing Matt Schaefer. We're gonna let Matt Schaefer run wild. Well, Schaefer wasn't even on the top power play either when they finally started the games. In pre-tournament, he got the looks there, and then they went back to Bonk once the game started. And then as soon as Schaefer went out, it's like, oh, boy, now we don't have anyone who can do the things that he did, which is a pretty glaring mark on that decision to only have one player that does those things. And then they also had Sam Dickinson not on any power play units for the first 2 games. And they were kind of telling him to play mistake-free hockey. Well, why'd you bring Sam Dickinson then? Because he doesn't play mistake-free hockey. He's a thoroughbred. You just let him run and you take the good with the bad. And so, my understanding is that's kind of what they've had to do now is they said, okay, Sam, you go play and do your thing and we'll clean up for your mistakes, because they've got a bunch of guys on that blue line that can play defensively and can play physically. So you let the offensive guys run. But you're absolutely right. And that quote, I knew I was going to get, it was going to get a lot of traction. And that's why I had to put it out there. But there's a lot of talk and it actually should say that they had 3 chances, because once Schaefer went out, they did have the option. They could have phoned down the road to Saginaw and been like, Zane, come on down. Sorry to Minio. You're going to have the Canucks prospect. You're going to have to stay out there, stay off the roster. But they chose not to. They chose to stick with the guys they brought, which is fine. But if you don't win gold, everyone's going to be asking those questions.
You outlined it earlier that lots of shot generation, and look, goalies are there to make stops. That happens. You're not always going to score. So if we try to parse through who isn't producing, that's one thing. Who hasn't performed particularly well, though, in your eyes, through 3 games for Canada?
How long does my session go here? How much time do I have? Yeah. There's a few.
We can extend it if the list is long enough, Cam. We can extend it. So just fire away, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some moments for all the players, right? Like Easton Cowan, I think probably leads the forward group in ice time, and he's a good player, and he's kind of a gritty offensive player who looks to disrupt and disturb and maybe flop a little bit to draw penalties. But he's just been taking a whole bunch of low percentage shots. He hasn't been engaged physically enough, I don't think. Same with a kid like you. They moved Cole Baudin up onto the first line instead of Bradley Nadeau yesterday. Well, the only reason you're putting him out there is to make space for everybody else, because he's a tank, but he's not there to finish. He's not there to create plays. And he wasn't running around banging bodies. Again, Bradley Nadeau, he's not being deployed properly, but this is an AHLer. He's the only kid who's not from the CHL. He's playing pro hockey, and he's playing first line minutes in Chicago for the Wolves. And he hasn't really impacted the game. Richie, he's had his moments, but again, you expect more from these guys, especially in some of these more these more cupcake matches against Latvia and Germany. You need them to start getting rolling. I thought McKenna has been their best player other than Schaefer before he got injured. He was trending to be their best player this entire tournament. Carter George, obviously, he's been fantastic. He hasn't a lot of goalie at this tournament, but up front, there hasn't been a lot of bright spots. And they know it. The players know it. They're getting a little feisty in the scrums. They're not feeling it, and they're not loving hearing about it either. So everything comes down to tomorrow night against the States. I know it's not the tournament on the line, but you want to face Switzerland in the quarterfinals. You don't want to face Czechia or Sweden even potentially in that spot. So an easier pathway if you can win tomorrow.
Just one quick one on Matthew Schaefer. First of all, how much does his leaving this tournament diminish your enjoyment of watching, arguably the top draft prospect this year? But ultimately, what does that do, if anything, to his draft stock? Or do people just know that he's an exceptional player and this is going to be a blip ultimately on a long and successful career?
Yeah, it definitely impacts my enjoyment of it, because he is a very fun player to watch. And he's a great kid too. I ran into him in the bowels of the rink there yesterday, and he's still with the team, or he was yesterday anyways. And he's a great kid, and he's a tremendous player. And so I'll give a little peek behind the curtain here, is that I have an article coming out later today where I polled every NHL contact I have, and I asked them basically their thoughts on number 1, Hagens versus Schaefer, all anonymous of course, and got them to vote on it. And I won't give you the final tally, but it is overwhelmingly in favor of Matt Schaefer at this point. So mono early in the season, no big deal. Broken collarbone here, no big deal. And that might end his regular season too, depending on how long it takes for him to get back. If Erie doesn't make the playoffs, his season could be done. And I still think he's shown and he's done enough that he, depends on who's picking, of course, that he is going to be one of the top couple of picks at the end of the day.
Jeff and I both have a question about Canadian head coach Dave Cameron, who I see is trending on X as we speak. Jeff asked me, what has he won? And I said, I don't know, but I know what he's lost. And that's a World Junior Gold Medal game back in 2011 when a 3-0 lead after 2 periods turned into a 5-3 defeat at the hands of the Russians in Buffalo. I was further perplexed when Oliver Bonk, Radek Bonk's kid, the aforementioned, mentioned to you guys covering it that running the point was a bit of an adjustment for him, that he usually plays the bumper spot. And then further perplexed when Dave Cameron said he was going to change the power play, but canceled practice between the two games, which seemingly would be a good time in a short tournament to work on your power play. Cam, how did Dave Cameron get this gig?
I have no insight on how he got the job. I know he is respected in coaching circles, and he has a resume. He's been a pro coach. There has been some perplexing moments with some of his decision making. I mean, like you said, right? His nickname is Bumper Bonk, right? For London, he plays in the bumper, and he's very good in the bumper. And Sam Dickinson runs the unit at the top. And Easton Cowan is the trigger man. Like they have it in London. And so now last night we saw that and they moved to it, and first power play, bang, Bumper Bonk, one-timer, finishes it from the slot. It still wasn't a great power play throughout the game, I wouldn't say, because I still don't feel like all the players are being utilized in the way they should. And then at even strength, what I mentioned, there's been a lot of decisions that are justifiably being questioned by fans and media. And he's had to answer those questions, and not always with the answers that you were hoping for, or taking those on the chin and being like, yeah, I should have done this or I should have done that. But we're just hoping that they can find a way to ignite the team and then utilize them in the right way. Because like I said earlier, there is enough talent on this team to win a gold medal. Like their blue line, despite losing Schaefer and leaving those kids at home, they're better than the Americans. They don't have a Z Bouillon. They don't have that number one rock solid guy anymore. But on a whole, it's a better defensive core. And up front, you have loads of first round talent. You have guys who can score. You just have to get them going. And that's his job, right?
Yeah. What are they up against tomorrow in the States?
They're up against a team that is, I would have said clicking until they ran into Finland there, which has been the game of the tournament so far. That was a lot of fun. They've been playing a little loose. The Americans have been playing a little loose defensively, and they've been doing a little bit of run and gun offense here, but they do have a lot of talent, especially that top line. Obviously, Gabe Perreault, he's, for my money, been their best forward. Jimmy Haggins, he's pushing Schaefer. They're going to be 1-2 or 1-2-3 in that, somewhere in that range. And then Ryan Leonard, that physical presence. This is his team. He hasn't really taken off just yet, but I imagine he's going to be saving his best performance for tomorrow night. Trey Augustine, who on a skill basis in net is the most talented netminder at this tournament, but he's been shaky. And the Finns just came right out and said it after their game. They said, we're attacking his glove hand because we felt like that was the best chance to beat him. And then they scored on that overtime goal where he got a piece of it. And you could see he was looking and is there a hole in my glove? So they have a ton of talent. I mentioned Z Bouillon. He's arguably the most talented defenseman at this tournament. For my money, the best two-way guy here. So they have guys that can really impact it, but their depth is lacking compared to the Canadians. And so that's where their advantage lies. Carter George is dialed right in. So, give the edge to him right now too in net. But they need their guys down the lineup to step up and produce and kind of eliminate and have those top lines kind of eliminate each other on a scoring basis. And I think if they do that, then they should be able to win. But I'd say the Americans have more confidence coming into this game.
Yeah. Lastly, the Canucks prospects we want to hit on here, Willander and Minio. And I saw a lot of chatter going into the tournament that Swedish defenseman Axel Sandin Pellikka might be the best player here. And I guess I just assumed because he was a right shot offensive defenseman that he ran power plays. And I learned that, no, he actually plays the flank on his club team power play. And that has given Canucks prospect Tom Willander an opportunity to run this Swedish power play. And from what I gather, Cam, he's been one of the best players at the tournament. A word or two about Willander and what he's been up to, because the Canucks must be very pleased seeing this sort of performance.
He's been very strong, as expected. But, he saved his best for that last game where he popped a couple goals, had 3 points, had himself a really strong game. And he's he's one of these guys that he'll chip in with some offense, but a lot of the time you just don't notice him too much, which is exactly how he wants it to be. Nobody beats him off the rush. He makes quick plays. He retrieves. He gets it out. But you're right. Having an opportunity to play all those power play minutes, and he's been firing the puck from the top because they have been the kind of the umbrella or the triangle boxes kind of collapsed down. They're focusing on that Sandin Pellikka side, Otto Stenberg on the other side too, Felix Unger-Sorum. They have some trigger men, and then it's been Willander at the top who's had all day to get the puck and walk in and snap some shots on net. So it's been really nice to see him, because he hasn't ever had that opportunity at BU. Didn't really get it a lot in Sweden in the J20 either. He's always kind of been a second power play unit guy, and then another just kind of quiet at 5-on-5. So he's played really, really well. I think it's great for Canucks fans that are looking at like some of the players that were drafted in and around him in that class. Zach Benson's already in the NHL. ASP is Sandin Pellikka was drafted later on, and he left the SHL leading all defensemen in points as a 19-year-old, like all defensemen in points, and maybe arguably the top. The third best league in the world. So no, I think Willander is going to be a very solid player for Vancouver. I expect he's going to come out of BU at the end of this year and turn pro and be an option for the Canucks, in 18 months or something like that.
Hey, just before we run, obviously the focus here is Canada-US, but top spot is up for grabs on both sides.
Yeah.
We just talked about Sweden. Nobody talking about the Czechs, and yet they've got a chance to finish top of their, like, what is this Czech team, and do they have a chance to run the show here?
I believe they're the St. Louis Blues minor league team, based on the number of St. Louis prospects on that Czechia side.
9 prospects in the tournament.
Yeah, and a ton of them on Czechia. Cam?
Yeah, it's been good. We're waiting for that showdown now, right? And both sides of the bracket, we imagined the U.S., Canada, Finland side was going to be the more difficult bracket, and then we thought Sweden was going to have an easier path to first onto that other side. But the Czechs, they've been pushing back. Hrabal's been really strong in net for them. They have some players, but what their kind of calling card is that they are a unit. They play strong defensively. They come at you in waves offensively. They don't have superstars out there, but they know how to finish, and they know how to get to the net, and they can get some of those greasy goals. Big win against their rivals Slovaks there yesterday. I wish that was the game today, so I could get over and I could have saw it, because I was over at the other rink and I missed it watching USA Finland. I always love to see two teams that don't like each other. So it's going to be a fun match. And like I said, is that the loser of this Canada-US game, they're going to end up third in their pool, which means they're playing number 2 on the other side, which is Sweden or Czechia. And that is not going to be an easy game for either US or Canada, whoever's going to be there. So there's a lot up for grabs on New Year's Eve, which is what we all wanted, right? When Canada lost Latvia, I was like, oh, that took the juice out of this New Year's Eve game. The juice is right back in the cup now, and I'm really excited for it.
Should be a fun day. Have yourself a Happy New Year there in Ottawa. Cam, thank you for this, and we'll catch up next week, buddy.
Appreciate it, guys. We'll talk soon.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Securison Price from the historic Wall Center, where you turn game night into a game weekend. Book your stay at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Securison Price exclusive rate. Some blackout date supply based on availability. You can text this show 778-402-9680. Email live at securisonprice.com. It all goes to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Just following up on Cam Robinson there in the World Junior Hockey Championships, and he laid it out New Year's Eve versus the United States. The winner's going to get first place in Group A. The loser will play for third. Means a more difficult opponent in the quarterfinals, and then check in Sweden for first place in Group B. The Swedes never lose preliminary round games here, right? They never win gold medals, but they also never lose preliminary round games. That was Canada's first ever loss to Latvia. And yes, goalie Leinard's Feldbergs was spectacular with 54 saves in regulation, and then all 8 Canadian shooters, Jeff. It was the damnedest shootout I've ever seen.
Right. So we talked to Cam about Dave Cameron. You get a goal earlier in the game from Jet Luchenko, the Flyers prospect, on a breakaway, Matt. A shorthanded breakaway.
Yes.
And you can't
quite
find
a finish.
You can't find a spot in your 8 shooters for a guy that has beaten the same goalie on a breakaway in the same game.
Unbelievable. that many Canadian kids could go up with that opportunity and all of them miss. When skill is what you have over other teams, or what you should have over other teams. And we mentioned Zane Parekh, the missing defenseman, but it goes far beyond that. Vancouver's Andrew Crystal playing for Kelowna against the Giants last night. Riley Heidt up in Prince George. Nanaimo's Matthew Wood, a returning player, was cut from this team. Beckett Seneca, the 3rd overall pick last year, who's got a whack of goals. Michael Misa, the undrafted or the 2025 draft prospect who's lighting up the OHL. Michael Hage, the Montreal Canadiens first-round center iceman. This was foreseeable. That's the trouble I'm having with it. And beyond that, did you catch the composition of this Latvian team? Jeff,
Young, I know that.
They're the youngest team in the tournament by 6 months.
Yeah.
They have 9 forwards who are 18 and younger and eligible to come back for this team.
Penciling them in for next year in Minnesota?
Absolutely. We're penciling them in for a medal next year. They gave the States a good game, too.
So I had to ask Teddy Bluger.
I saw.
I didn't get a chance on Saturday. It was game day. But after practice yesterday, I said, "Did you watch the game?" And he laughed and big smile. And he said, "I intended to watch until the score got out of hand." And then I stuck with it.
Yeah,
and then
he
says with a sort of twinkle in his eye, "Turned out to be a pretty good game."
Yeah, no, not so bad, Teddy. He's
Yes,
dropped the
exactly.
S, of course. Seattle Seahawks eliminated from the National Football League.
Did you grind
playoffs.
through? Did you? I know you're a Bears guy. Did you grind through that?
Jeff, not only did I grind through that, but we set up a sociable over at the Pemberton Station Pub in North Vancouver. Your former neighbor, my good friend Jeff and his wife Laura joined us. They're Bears fans. They brought friends from Aldergrove. My brother and I crossed 2 bridges from Kits.
Not worth that.
And we all showed up for 9 points and 3 field goals.
Oh, man.
Good thing the company and conversation was flowing because the offense certainly wasn't. Seattle, of course, needed the Rams to lose, and Kyler Murray and the Cardinals decided to give that game away late on Saturday. I can't believe they threw the ball there. They had 2 timeouts left and an opportunity to run the ball and kill more clock for LA not to have an opportunity. But anyways, mistakes from the Cardinals. The Rams get the win. And then yesterday, the strangest, I got to say, I would prefer the NFL just go to point differential when you get down to this tiebreaker.
Strength of victories.
Strength of schedule, strength of victory. So it was an odd scenario whereby 5 different games affected the Seahawks playoff standing. If 3 of those games went a certain way, Seattle would be eliminated. And sure enough, they were, because Minnesota beat Green Bay, Buffalo beat the Jets, and then last night Washington beat Atlanta in a hell of a game. Overtime Sunday nighter. So, I mean, after the Rams won, they needed like a stupid amount of things to happen next weekend. But
like winning the Powerball, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I saw somebody tweet out every scenario that had to fall their way, and it was never going to happen.
Right. And frankly, after that lump of coal Thursday nighter, that was probably deserving. Big questions now coming up for this regular season finale against the Rams for Seattle. Is this the final game in a Seahawks uniform for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett? Lockett's been a terrific Seahawk, but he's getting up there in age on a big ticket. DK Metcalf has seemingly forgotten how to run routes. A little more diva is showing up with DK. Do you want to see Sam Howell at quarterback? I know he got a brief cameo a couple of weeks back and didn't look great. Do you run it back with Geno Smith, Jeff? So some huge questions facing the Seattle Seahawks. Personally, I didn't even expect this from them this year, so I'm willing to say that this was a decent or a good season for them. I was particularly impressed with how Geno played, albeit the mistakes in the red zone certainly were a running theme. You are a little low in the draft order to be looking at quarterbacks, so I'm not sure what they're going to do, but, head coach McDonald there was pretty decisive as the season went along. He fixed the defense midway through, which I think is good. You should be able to fix interior offensive line. Like, that's not usually a difficult position group to find talent. Where are you at with these Seahawks?
Well, I think for me, and I'm with you, that I didn't have huge expectations coming in, and so the record isn't terrible.
No.
I think one of the surprises for me, though, is how that whole Lumen Field effect is gone.
Totally
Teams
gone.
just barge in the front door and kick the crap out of the Seahawks on home turf now.
And it seems like a lot of Seahawks season ticket subscribers buy their seats for the pleasure of selling them at a profit to visiting fans.
I mean, that's where we're at, though, in this world,
Yeah.
right? Like, they're not alone.
No.
That's not a... Look down the street here
Yeah.
and see some of that, too. But, I mean, that just used to be automatic with the penalties and the noise and everything else. And, it's cyclical. It'll get back at some point. But, yeah, I mean, it goes hand in hand with the excitement level of the team. And so, just something for them to consider, because it really was. I mean, for a while there, they had the best home field advantage in the National Football League.
And now it's their own offensive lineman jumping offside with the noise level. Football north of the border here, the BC Lions released kick returner Terry Williams. I like the column J.C. Abbott wrote on 3 Down Nation that he was kind of a microcosm for what went wrong. Like,
totally.
He wasn't scary. Okay, he was dependable catching the ball, but he wasn't giving you a whole lot, and you refused to make the move to somebody who was a little more explosive in the kicking game.
I mean, sure-handed.
Game.
I mean, that would be so far down the list of sort of the acceptable for a guy in that position. Like, you're telling me you can't find a sure-handed guy that has wheels? Like, he was never a threat.
Never a threat. They have re-signed Canadian defensive back / linebacker Patrice Rene to a 2-year extension. Good young Canadian player and versatile too. He started at Sam linebacker. He started at safety and halfback. He was the stalwart on special teams. These are the sorts of guys you win with. So I was pleased to see that come back. Still haven't heard about the coaching staff yet, outside of the reports that Mike Benavides is going to return to his defensive coordinator post. And then how about this from Fox and Athletic football reporter Bruce Feldman? Sacramento State University is set to hire Edmonton Elks general manager, former Edmonton Elks general manager G-Roy Simon, the Lions legend, as their new GM. These college teams now have general managers. It looks like G-Roy, missing out on his opportunity to be the GM in Edmonton, has decided to take his talents to the NCAA.
Wish him nothing but the best. An absolute on-field legend, off-field legend, just one of the good guys who has put in the years. And you're right, if couldn't get the opportunities and the looks that he was seeking here, then I'm not going to hold anything against him. Going south of the line and finding employment there. I hope it all works out.
Yeah, I hope so too. Sad to lose him from the CFL. He has been such a stalwart up here, but wish him the best. He's an absolute gem. G-Roy. The Whitecaps have lost a couple of players here. Striker forward Fafa Picault has signed with Miami. He was a little bit disgruntled at midseason, but he got back on track, but he was looking to be a little closer to home. And there's reports that Diber Caicedo is going to be transferred to the Colombian side junior. This was something that Blake had predicted when they protected Caicedo in the expansion draft. So it looks like some money might be coming in for Caicedo.
Just feels like nothing but shin kicks, though, to this Whitecaps fan base. They're starting up here in a couple of weeks, and they still don't have a coach.
No. Well, Axel says he's got a coach ready to go and didn't want to mess up his Christmas, and there were some immigration issues.
But it's...
Yeah, but at least the good news is if they have a coach, at least he can advise on player personnel moves over the next few weeks. But he wasn't there to advise on expansion draft, on super draft, and on some of the early free agency signings we're seeing in MLS. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from, last Monday. When do you want the Miller-Pettersson matter resolved? ASAP won the poll. It got 52% of the vote. Leave It Be got 35%. 8% voted by the deadline. 5%, just 5%, said this summer. Jay, it has to be ASAP, but that doesn't mean that one needs to be traded. There are teams behind them in the standings that see the Canucks as vulnerable, and it's because the rift is affecting their play. 4X Pyro says, aside from the media, who is saying that they're having problems?
The
Patrick Alvin, the head coach, the captain. if they don't solve it ASAP, they risk missing the playoffs, and that is a fair shout now. Drew says, ASAP, why unnecessarily kill a year of Quinn Hughes' sweetheart contract over this nonsense? It's a fair shout. Sean D says, they're telling us everything is fine. Why must we speculate? It's resolved once everyone here shuts up. Well, the thing is everyone has shut up over the last 2 years, and guess what? It hasn't resolved.
No.
And then Chris says, an auction for Miller will get many more teams involved. He's built for the playoffs. His age doesn't help the Canucks' future much. That said, EP hasn't shown much for quite a while, but his potential is higher and the cap relief is very substantial. In my opinion, a complete retool is needed. I have actually allowed my mind to wander into that vein, Jeff, that like, did they going to have to retool the team if they don't fix this? I do not have an error and omission from last Monday, which means Patrick Johnson was perfect. He's going to join us on the show as a guest tomorrow. Jeff's in the co-host chair again. We have a show tomorrow and then back Friday. So going to take a couple days off here over the New Year's. And, of course, Rinkwide will be going tomorrow night after the game against the
place
Calgary.
to be on New Year's Eve.
Absolutely. Bring some champagne, sing Old Lang Syne, and join Jeff and Peter tomorrow.
No, it's a solo show.
Solo show for Jeff tomorrow.
Hired help is hard to find on New Year's Eve, as you can imagine. So
it is.
Most people have plans. My plan is to be right here doing Rinkwide. And
excellent.
Look, we're going to stay right to the final 5 minutes of the Canucks game, and you have to now. That comes with the territory of this group.
Yeah.
Got to see it through to the final buzzer.
There was a little bit of me when the 5-1 goal was called back that went, couldn't possibly, could it? Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. And keep it local.